Automation Hour. This is our last Automation Hour for 2019. So thank you for joining us. And let me advance the slides. Okay. All right, so if you're joining us for the first time, all lines are muted. Please post any questions that you have to the Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour. And we will post the recording as well as a link to the deck after sometime after the session. We will also communicate that out on the Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour. We'll also provide a link on our website, automationhour.com, and you'll see postings out on Twitter as well. All right, and we are lined up for 2020 up till the end of July. So even if you can't attend those sessions live, we recommend registering for them, and then you'll get notified when the recording is posted up. So just to note, your co-hosts are coming back at the beginning of the year to present. So I will start off the year on January 10th, followed by David and Rakesh, and then we have our community members and MVPs coming to present, first time and repeat presenters. And we can't bring this free online webinar series to you without our sponsor, Concrete.io. So thank you for our sponsorship. And here are your co-hosts, Rakesh, myself, and David, and this was taken at Midwest Dreamin'. And with that, I am going to introduce Matt. He's a first-time presenter on Automation Hour. And, you know, big shoes to fill, last presenter of the year. No pressure.
Oh, geez, no pressure there.
So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Matt.
All right. Can you see my screen okay?
I can.
Perfect. So let me, oh, I guess I should have, I'm not seeing the presentation. Is there a way that I can, I guess, get in and just look at the slides really quickly? There we go. Yeah, so I guess as I go through these slides, Jen, would you mind kind of just, I guess, going to the next one, since I'm not going to be controlling. So as you mentioned, or actually, if you could go back to the bio slide really quickly. There we go. So as you mentioned, my name is Matt Godfroy. I'm a Salesforce administrator over here at Lexia Learning. So I've been working within Salesforce for a number of years now, 4-time certified. You know, I just wanted to say thank you really quickly to David, Jen, and Rakesh for having me on Automation Hour here today. There's been a lot of past Automation Hour presentations that I've been able to sit in on and attend and get a lot of useful information from those, and then use that information in our org over here. So, you know, I'm hopeful that what I go over, what we look at today, can maybe have a similar effect on any of you out there listening. So I'm hopeful that what I go over is interesting and is something that you can use. So with that being said, before I get into what I'm going to cover, I just mentioned the first 2 slides here on my bio slides, so I'll go over some of the fun facts that I have here down at the very bottom. So as far as the favorite project that I have, working within Salesforce specifically, that was a pretty easy one. So implementing Salesforce CPQ, that was a project that myself and the team that I'm on, we had implemented that this past summer, and excuse me, it was a huge challenge. A lot of hard work, a lot of time and effort went into the project, but at the same time, it was a ton of fun. The experience was great, learned a lot, and once we got to go live and didn't have of course, you're going to have issues, but we didn't have anything that was major or catastrophic. So just probably one of our prouder moments working within Salesforce. Last but not least here, certainly didn't want to make this slide all about myself. Fun fact, this is not an opinion. I stress, not an opinion. Tom Brady is the greatest of all time. Born and raised up here in New England, so I'm lucky enough to, watch and just be a part of a lot of championship teams and whatnot. So if you're a sports fan as well, and we happen to maybe connect at a future Salesforce conference or on LinkedIn, and you want to talk sports, maybe debate this fact a little bit, let me know, and I'd be happy to do that. Next slide, please. Okay, so most importantly, why am I here? So number one, I love automation, just like I'm sure a lot of you do. And number two, I'm going to be going over an internal ticket system process that we've built over here in our org for our end users to use. So you can see in parentheses there, this is something that, everything we're going to cover or look at today, it's all going to be within the Lightning environment. So it is specific to Lightning. I should stress, certainly not limited to Lightning. So if you're still in a classic environment, you like what you see, you want to build something similar, certainly, fear not. If you're still in a classic org, you can still do and really perform everything we're going to be doing today. You might have to make a couple of tweaks here and there, but for the most part, either org will suffice for this process we're going to be looking at. Next slide, please. So what does this ticket system, what does it actually do? Well, if you've ever been on Salesforce support site, you've had to log a support case with them. We've pretty much built something similar to that for our end users to use, specifically our sales reps. That's what we're going to be looking at today. The process is going to work just like that, right? They're going to be in Salesforce. They're going to be able to essentially reach out to us with any questions. They can offer input, ask for help. Maybe they're getting hit with a validation rule, whatever the case may be. We're going to kind of steer our end users to use this ticket system that we've built for them. Almost, I don't want to say as a replacement for email back and forth, but, it was getting to a point sometime maybe last year or the year before that, at least for us, email communication between ourselves and our end users was just kind of getting crazy. It was getting out of hand. Maybe we weren't getting back to emails fast enough just because of the amount we were getting. So we sat down, we decided, hey, let's build something internal for our end users to use. And that kind of gets me on to bullet number two, where because this process, the backbone of this process is off of a custom object we're going to be looking at, it's going to give us transparency, right? Because we're going to be creating records off of this custom object, we can build all of our own processes, code, whatever we want to do, right? Validation rules. Because it's our custom object, we can do exactly that. So we can take the information that we're going to be creating based off of these records, and we can run reports, we can do list views, dashboards, track, maybe we want to track SLA times, whatever the case may be, we can do that because it's our data. And another benefit, since it's our data, we can then use the information that we're getting from our sales reps, we can analyze that data. So, for example, let's say we're getting, 20 tickets created based off of one subject and only one off of another. Well, that's going to tell us, hey, maybe we need to work on that other process that all these reps are having an issue with, right? So just again, there's that transparency. It's going to let us utilize, analyze the data, and hopefully build better processes. Next slide, please. So what's included, as you can see, it's going to be fairly large. So I'm trying to get through this super quick, and then we can get into the actual demo and the build. There's a custom object. There's some custom metadata types. We're going to be using an app utility bar. So there's that Lightning specific part of the process. Really just using the app utility bar to trigger or start our flow, Lightning flow. And last but not least, process builder. So process builder, this should actually have an asterisk next to it. I'm not going to have time or really just kind of be able to cover that in today's demonstration. I do have another slide going over, almost like a extended process, or additional process, where if you like what you see today, you can take it a step further. I don't necessarily want to call it part two, but in part two, we're going to be utilizing a process builder, another Lightning flow, and some more metadata. So just keep that in mind. Next slide, please. So how does this process actually work? Well, essentially, our end user is going to be in Salesforce. of course, right? And they're using the utility bar that we set up or create down at the very bottom of their screen. They're going to create one of these tickets. That's going to launch a screen flow, and that ticket's going to be assigned to the correct support team member, right? Just another Salesforce user. We'll correctly assign that ticket based off of the information we've gotten and captured from our sales rep creating this ticket. So that way, the flow is going to give us the flexibility to really, is the ticket that gets created, is it maybe something that's related to finance? Well, let's send it to the finance team. Is it something that the sales operation team needs to help with? Let's send it over to the sales ops team, and so on. Next slide, please. Okay, so here, this is my last slide, and then again, we'll get into our developer org here and go over what we're talking about. So I mentioned in a couple slides ahead of this, the additional process. So kind of part two, I don't necessarily want to call it that, but really just extending what we've done. So this would cover what's going to happen once that support user closes the ticket. So they've helped out that end user with whatever issue that person's having. Well, maybe they'll want to close that ticket, right? Change the record type, and then send an email to the user who created the ticket, just letting them know, hey, here's the answer, right? You're all set, whatever the case may be. So I've just thrown in some information down at the very bottom. If you like what you see today and you do want to go a little, just another step within this entire process, there's just some of my information. Maybe I can, record it. Maybe we can attach it, with part one on YouTube or something like that. I can certainly work with, Jen and David and Rakesh and try and figure that out. Okay, so I don't think there's another slide. I believe that's it. So let me get into our org and we can go over what we've built. So, show my screen. Okay, Jen, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. So as you can see, don't judge my empty org here. I'm just in a Trailhead developer org, so we're not going to be looking at too much data, but what I'll do is I'll do the demonstration really quickly of creating one of these tickets, and then we'll get into the build. So with that being said, well, really quickly before I get into that demo, let me open up my user record that I have created or set up in this org, and just kind of go over a prerequisite. So as you can see, I'm on my user record here, and I've assigned myself a role, right? Specifically the Northeast team. So again, I've gone ahead of time and I've created the Northeast team as a role, which is important because I want to be able to do this demonstration both as that sales rep creating this ticket, but at the same time, I've left my profile as system admin. That way we can kind of get the perspective from or as our Salesforce admin once that ticket gets created. So I didn't want to make this demonstration about you guys having to watch me, log in and out as multiple users. So again, just set up my user so that we can kind of do both parts of this process. Now, you might be thinking like, why am I talking so much about this actual prerequisite? Could I have just gone straight into the demo? Well, we're specifically going to be using this Northeast team role to fetch some metadata in the flow that we're going to be looking at in a couple of minutes. So, having our role set up with the correct value, that's going to be important to us in our flow. So there's the prereq. Let's get on with the demonstration. So again, we're going to use our imagination here. Just pretend we're logged in right now as a sales rep on the Northeast team. You can see I'm in my Lightning org, and specifically, I'm in a sales app. So no matter where I go within this app, right, you might be clicking on multiple tabs, maybe looking at a report, a specific record, even your home page. My admin has set up this utility bar specifically with this new ticket button. So no matter where I am, it's easy for me to create one of these tickets and, essentially just reach out, ask for help from our support users. To speak on that right there, that functionality, it's been super helpful for us with our Lightning migration, as well as just the buy-in, on this process, because, enabling our users to reach out to us right within the system. Maybe they're on a record, they don't want to leave that record, they're stuck within a validation rule, whatever the case may be. They're not going to have to drop what they're doing in Salesforce. They can create the ticket right then and there and then get on with their day, versus maybe logging in or clicking open a new tab, getting into Gmail and sending us an email. So the buy-in and the acceptance, because this process is so easy for our end users to use, has been through the roof. So let's go ahead and create one of these tickets. Let's pretend we're having an issue. So we'll click new ticket. Now you can see the first thing that our end user is presented with is a screen, right? So this is one of those screen elements from a flow. And again, we'll be looking at all, how we did this in a couple of minutes when we get into the build. So you can see if we click ticket type, there's a couple of different types here. In our production order, we of course have a lot more types, but for the demo, I did want at least to have more than one. Let's go ahead and create anything related to Lightning, right? So maybe our issue is something related to the Lightning UI. So we'll click next. We'll work our way through this flow here. Before I create this ticket, so to speak specifically on this anything related to Lightning ticket type, that's kind of where it's been really helpful for us within just our migration to Lightning. We've recently kind of finalized that migration and giving our users who are new to the Lightning UI, giving them the ability to create one of these tickets, and kind of, as you can see, it's pretty blank canvassy, right? It's really just, hey, give us any and all information that you have, or the problems that you have related to Lightning. Type it in, send us a link, whatever the case may be. Let us know, and then we can look at that data. We can analyze the data, and make changes, right? So maybe a lot of our users are having issues with a new page layout or a record type. We're going to see that all within these tickets. So let's create one of these tickets really quickly. And we'll just work our way through this flow, right? So we'll hit next. Next screen. So our users are presented with really just a question asking them, hey, will you be uploading an attachment to the ticket? Which is always helpful from a support user perspective, right? More information, the better. So we'll go ahead and upload a file. And that's it. We'll hit next. And now our user's presented with that confirmation screen, just really letting them know, hey, this ticket's been created, and they can hit next one more time. Kind of just, as you can see, restarting this process, and they can either create another ticket or get on with their day. So that's really it from an end user perspective. Now, before we hop into, or I guess, hop back into reality as our support user, the Salesforce admin who's going to be getting that ticket, let's just go over really quickly the opportunity creation ticket type. I'm not going to do this ticket to completion, but I do want to show you guys kind of the flexibility and the functionality that you're going to have when you're building these screens, right? So as you can see, because this ticket type is specific to opportunity creation, there's a lot more information that you're going to see on this screen that we've built, right? Which is important because, in this example, our Northeast team sales rep, they might need help creating an opportunity, and we're going to route this ticket type. Instead of having this ticket type go to the Salesforce admin on their team, we want this ticket to go to the sales ops, analyst or support user for their team. So, when that sales ops team member gets this ticket that then gets created, having this information is going to be super helpful to them because they're going to want to know, all this information when they're creating that opportunity. Specifically, what I wanted to touch on really quickly was we're even going to have lookup component functionality, on these screen elements, which, that even it makes it even better, right? Because, it enables our end user to explicitly lock in what account they want this opportunity created under. And at the same time, that sales ops team member, when they're getting this ticket, they can see right off the bat, okay, here's the account that, our sales rep wants that opportunity created under. So as you can see, it's going to work just like a lookup field when you're on really any other type of record in the standard Salesforce UI. So again, I'm not going to do this one to completion, but I did just kind of want to show the flexibility that you're going to have when you're building these screen elements. So with that being said, we're jumping back into reality here, no longer role playing as that Northeast team sales rep. So let me open up my email. Right now, I'm just logged in as myself, the Salesforce admin, snapping my fingers here. And you can see a new ticket has been assigned to me. So that ticket that our sales rep had just created, I've just gotten an email letting me know, hey, someone needs your help with something. Ignore the kind of ignore the template that we're actually looking at here. I just use standard Salesforce email template and email alert functionality to set this up. So, I didn't clean it up too nicely. There's like HTML formatting and whatnot you can certainly use in your production org. But I did want to touch on this email that we're receiving, because we're still going to have that merge field functionality, right? So just like that, right as this email is opened, we can see who created the ticket, when did they do it, and some of the information from our end user. We even have a link to the ticket, right? I even threw that into this email template. So let's open that up. We'll go to our ticket record, and we'll actually see what our sales rep just created. So now we're on our record, and again, just pretty much the same information we were looking at on that email template. Because this is going to be based off of your custom object, you can, of course, change the fields you're going to be working with, the page layouts, the record types, all that good stuff. So, try not to pay too much attention to the actual setup of my object here. What's important is if I go over here to related, we can even see, here's a shameless plug of my company here. So we can even see that image that our end user provided us with when they created that ticket. So as you can see, the process from both our end user perspective and our support user perspective, it's really quick and really easy for them to use. It's even more efficient for them to use something like this than it is for them to email back and forth, which, I can attest to. So, that's kind of it for the demo. Again, there is more to the larger process, right? So what's going to happen when our Salesforce admin marks this as complete? Well, a whole lot more is going to happen, that we're certainly using within our org, but this is kind of what I wanted to show and demonstrate in today's presentation. So let's get into the build, and then, I'm going to try and run through the build as quickly as I can. There's a lot going on with it, even though the process, from an end user perspective, the process seems quick and easy. There's definitely a lot within the build. So let me get into that really quick, and then we can open it up for questions. So as far as the build, excuse me, as far as the build goes, now we're going to be working with our custom object, right, our ticket object, a metadata type record. So we'll look at that second, and then we'll get into our screen flow, which is certainly running this entire process. So I'm on my ticket record here, so I'll click on this little wrench icon, and we'll go straight to the object. There really isn't, too much that I want to show on this object, simply because it's a custom object, right? Every org is probably going to have theirs set up differently. You might even give yours a different name if you decide to adopt something, this type of process or something similar. So I did still kind of want to go over the flexibility and the functionality you'll have with it. So you can, of course, build all your own custom fields, right? So I've just created a bunch just for the demonstration to kind of show off what we can do with that. As far as page layouts go, so if we look at our page layouts, ignore this bottom one. This is just kind of the master one. What's important is obviously, so there, we have our lightning migration layout, we have our opportunity creation layout, and then we have, right, our closed layouts, which again are kind of for that second part of this or additional part of the process. So if we go to record types, right, we're going to see basically the same thing, right? Just record types coinciding to those page layouts we were just looking at. That way, you can have that, that functionality of being able to lock fields or show different page layouts for the records your end users are going to be looking at. Okay, so that's it for the object. I'll leave this open just in case we have to reference it. But I will open another tab, and then we can get into that metadata. So we'll go back home. We're still on setup, and from our quick find, we will search custom metadata, and we'll go into here. So what are we doing with custom metadata types within this process? So what we're going to be focusing on is this second type here. So ticket assignment. We'll open this up, and essentially, what I'm doing with metadata types is really just storing field information. So if we scroll down here, all I've done for this metadata type, I guess it's kind of an object, is create a couple of fields, right? So we have 3 custom fields. We can ignore this field. I'm actually not even going to be looking at this one when we get into our flow. So really just these 2 fields, right? So Salesforce admin support user ID and sales ops support user ID. And as you can see, they're all just text 18 fields. Okay, so what am I actually doing specifically with those fields? Well, if we go up here and we look at the records I've created off of this metadata type, you can see that I've created a record for really just each and every one of my sales team within our org, right? So the way that our sales reps or sales org is set up is it's regionalized, right? So we have one record for each team, right? Midwest team, Northeast team, all the way down the list. What I want to look at specifically is we'll open up Northeast and Midwest. So once Lightning does its thing here, there we go. So we have our Midwest team record open. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now we have those two different metadata type records open. And as you can see, again, I'm just storing user ID field values on my 3 custom fields that I've created off of this object. Ignore the actual values you're going to be looking at. They're all the same, right? They're just my user ID, because I'm in this Trailhead org. There's not too many users I can work with. But in a production org, it's safe to assume that maybe the Northeast team, such as ours, is going to have a different sales ops support user than the Midwest team. So that's kind of how and why we're using these metadata types in this process, is really just to store these field values, and then we can then reference these records and these field values in our flow, and assign the tickets that get created. We can assign those tickets to the correct team members. Alternative to storing these field values could be to put them on each and every one of your sales users, user IDs or user records. You can certainly do that, but as far as maintenance and just kind of upkeep goes, having to only update these 5 records instead of maybe 100 or 100 plus sales user records, I'm going to take option A over doing the alternative anytime of the week, twice on Sunday. So let me get out of the Midwest team. I want to leave open the Northeast team metadata type record, and that way when we're in our flow, we can kind of reference this record and get back to it, and hopefully make more sense of how we're using it. So with that being said, let's see if I am still in setup, so that's good. So let's hop into the flow that, again, is driving this whole process. So from setup home, we'll search flow. And under process automation, we'll find our flows. So what we're going to be looking at today, as far as the flows go, is this top one, right? So Lightning migration tickets utility bar. As you can see, the process type is going to be screen flow, which is important, right? Because that's how, as you guys saw in the demo, that's how we're going to be launching and kind of working through our flow. So to do that, you'll click new flow. I apologize. So I'm not going through the actual and rebuilding all this stuff, just because it would have took too much time. So everything is already built, but I'm hoping that, I can explain this stuff so that when you do try and potentially build this yourself, you can do that just following along. So you'll click new flow, and then right off the bat, you'll be presented with a screen that's asking you, what type of flow. Just go ahead and select screen flow, and not, I think the other one's auto launched. Yeah, the other one is auto launch flow. So let's open up our flow and get into this process. So again, I've mentioned it a couple times here, but because of the lack of time, I wish I could have gone over the page navigation, everything we're seeing on this page, go over the debug log, all that good stuff. Maybe I can save that for another time. Can't do it today. What I'm going to do, instead, is specifically go over everything that I built for this process. So let's zoom out really quick, just to give you guys an idea of what we're working with. You can see there's, a fairly good amount of elements. Certainly not the smallest, not the largest, but definitely a good size process flow. So everything here on this canvas, I've just drag and dropped from my elements toolbox over here on the left. So to give you guys an idea of how that works, so we'll grab a screen, we'll drop it, and then you build that element. So I've already gone ahead and of course done that part of this or step in this process. So let's zoom back in and we'll work through this flow. What elements have I added? What resources am I using on these elements? All that good stuff. So right off the bat, right, how are we starting this flow? Well, as you guys saw in the demonstration, our end user is going to click new ticket from that utility bar or that utility item, and they're going to be presented with a screen. So what type of ticket are you going to be creating? So that's where they're going to be presented with this screen here, which is a screen element, right? So I've just drag and dropped this from this left-hand side over here, and we're going to now build or look at how I built this element. So let me go through these really quickly. So you can see there's going to be a header, a pick list component, and a footer. As you can see, unlike pick list, which I can delete, so pick list is really the only kind of the custom component that I've actually added onto this element. So the way you're going to add any and all components for at least screen elements is you're going to find them from over here on the left, and you really just, again, just like working on the canvas, just drag and drop them into the middle of the screen here, and then you'll build out that component. So I'll go over pick list really quickly, but first to touch on header and footer, you can see over here on the left-hand side of this, or the right-hand, excuse me, we have screen properties for this screen element. Well, if you scroll down, you can pick and choose whether or not you actually want to hide or show your header and your footer. Footer, I most certainly want to show, right? Because we want this flow to be interactive. We want to enable our users to use the buttons to work their way through the flow. So let me go over the pick list component really quickly, and then we'll get onto our other elements. So you'll give it a label. Data type is going to be text. Default value. So just like you're setting up a pick list field on an object and setup, you can apply or supply your end user with a default value. I'm not doing that here, but it's just going to be based off of the choices that you set up here. So how did, or what am I doing to set up these choices? Well, all you have to do is click on add choice, right? We'll open up, or we'll click into this little bar here, and you'll select new resource. So for resource type, we will go with choice, and then you'll build out your choice. So you'll give it a name, description, choice label. That's going to be important, right? That's what your end user is going to be seeing. You have a lot of formatting functionality there. Most importantly, so I want to touch on data type and choice value. So I'm using 4 choices in this flow. Every single one of my choices are going to be data type text, and I'm leaving choice value blank. So I don't need to assign a value to any one of my choices when it gets selected. All I need to do is grab that choice, right? So choice has been selected by the end user. Okay, that's it. Let's go on to the next thing in the flow. I'm not assigning a value to any choice within this flow. So we'll cancel out of that, and I'll delete this kind of draft choice there. So that's it. I'll cancel out of there, and we'll work our way through our flow. So I apologize again if I'm kind of talking or going through this so fast. I want to make sure that I get through everything, but also be as specific as I can. So element number 2 in our flow, we have a get records. So let's open this up and see what we're doing with this. So give it a label, of course. So get records of this object. What object are we going to be trying to retrieve within our flow? Well, as you can see, this is going to be that ticket assignment __ metadata type object that we were looking at before we got into our flow. So what are we going to be doing once we find that object? Well, as we scroll down here, what record are we specifically going to be looking for? Let's find that ticket assignment metadata type record whose master label equals our current user role name. And this is just a formula that I had built. So, hopefully this is kind of, if you guys think back to before we got into this flow, we were looking at that Northeast team metadata type record. So we've just found that record, right, based off of this formula. And to show you guys, how I built this formula here. So I'll just clear it out, and you'll go with new resource, and formulas, 3rd option down. And then down at the very bottom here, you'll have your formula pane. So that's all I've done, right? Just give me that Northeast team, at least in our case, give me that Northeast team user role. Find that metadata type record that matches, and let's store that record and some of its fields in a variable. That way, as we can see, so we're going to grab that record ID, that Salesforce admin support user ID, and the sales ops support user ID, all from the Northeast team metadata type record. So now we know whatever choice our end user selects for the ticket type, well, if they go with anything related to Lightning, I want those tickets to be created and assigned to my Salesforce admin on the Northeast team. On the other side of things, if my end user wants to create, or is looking for help creating an opportunity, if they select opportunity creation for that ticket type, let's send that to the sales ops team member who's on that Northeast team. So that's kind of how I'm using that metadata type record within this flow. So we'll cancel out of that. And then let's go to our decision. So next element here, decisions are cool because we can, kind of steer and guide our flow in certain ways and directions based off of, input or values that we're, really kind of setting up within this decision element. So what are we doing here? So we're just going to create a couple of outcomes. So to create an outcome, all you're going to have to do is click this plus sign, and then you'll build your outcome. So I won't do this new one, but I certainly want to touch on the outcomes that I've, of course, created. So as we can see, 2 different outcomes, just one based off of each one of those choices, right, from the first screen element, right? So what have I done for each one of my choices? So choice number 1, anything related to Lightning. When do we want to execute the outcome? Well, let's do that when our choice, anything related to Lightning, is selected by our end user in that very first, right, that top screen element that's starting our flow. And this here, this is just a global constant provided by Salesforce. So I've done that for, of course, both one of my choices on my screen element. So that's all I've done there in the decision. But again, the decision is really important, really powerful, because we can steer our flow different ways based off that information. So how am I then, kind of assigning this, arrow to the left, this arrow to the right? Well, let me delete these, just clicking on them and hitting delete. And I'll do that just to show you guys how, simple and easy it is. So because I've already built my flow, I know that I want to go this way, right? All these elements I've built are for that Lightning migration ticket type. So all you have to do is click and hold the very bottom of that decision element, and we'll assign it to the element that we want to go to next. So yep, let's go this way when the outcome is anything related to Lightning. And of course, on the other side of things, we want to go right when our end user selects the opportunity creation choice. So that's it. Let me go over this side first, because this was, kind of specific to our demonstration. And then if I have time, I'll go over what happens when we go with opportunity creation. They're pretty similar. The real only difference is kind of this very top screen that we had looked at in the demo. So with that being said, so what is our flow doing next? So now that we've gotten, to kind of sum up what we've done, right? We've gotten the ticket type our end user wants to create. We've gotten that custom metadata type record, which is storing the correct or, team assigned support user IDs. Well, before we can, move forward, let's open this screen element and let's get some information. Let's get some of that specific information from our end user. So again, this is just a screen element. I've drag and dropped a text component and a long text area component. I'll be quick through these. These are just like building a field, right? And setup UI, so you can make them required. You can set visibility, do validation rules on them, all that good stuff. You'll have the capability to do that within your flow. So I'll cancel out of that. So we're almost there, right? We've now gotten all the information we need from our end user and their role. So let's start to create that ticket, right? But however, before we can do that, we need to get one more thing. So because we've gone left in our flow, we know that, when we were looking at our custom ticket object, we had a page layout and a record type based off of Lightning migration, which is, anything related to Lightning, and opportunity creation. So reason being is because we might, want to have different fields on each one of those page layouts, right, based off the ticket type. So before we can create our ticket in this create records element, we got to go and find some more records. What specifically? Well, as we go down here, so get records of this object, skip the object. We're going to just go straight for a record type. So what record type specifically? Well, find me the record type whose developer name equals Lightning migration, right? I just copy and pasted this value in. And that's the API name of one of our record types based off of our custom ticket object that we were looking at the very start of this build. So we found that record type. What are we going to do with it? We're just going to store its ID in a variable. That way, when we create our ticket, we can reference this variable and this ID and throw it into the record type ID field on that ticket record that we create. So that's all we're doing with this get records component or get records element. And now let's create our ticket. So this is the fun part, right? So we'll give it a label, of course. How many records do we want to create? Just one. How do we want to set the fields? How do we want to set the value for those fields on that ticket that we create? Well, we're going to go with option number 2, because that's exactly, that's what we're doing in our flow. We've seen and we've retrieved information in a number of different ways. So we kind of have to use option number 2 here. So what do we want to do next? So let's create a record of, obviously, our custom ticket object. And now, again, kind of the fun part is we're going to use everything that we've gotten and retrieved in our flow, the resources, the values, the variables. We're going to use them all over here in this value column and throw them into the custom fields that I've created and set up off of my ticket object, right? So that way, when our ticket gets created, all the information we've gotten and retrieved is now being used, and it's on that ticket record for our support user to see and grab the information from when they're looking at that record. So I'll go through these really quick. I hope I'm doing okay on time. I'll go through these really quickly, and then we'll move on to the next element. So assign to, this is, again, just a custom lookup field that I've created on my ticket object. This is an important one, right? Because as you saw in the demo, the assigned to person, which in my case was, kind of a bad demo because I had created the ticket and I'd also assigned it to myself. But as we saw, Matt Godfroy, the Salesforce admin, he received the email alert because he was filled in as the assigned to when that ticket got created. So how did we get his ID or his username in the assigned to field? Well, if I click over here, it's just that Salesforce admin support user ID field that I've stored on my Northeast team custom metadata type, right? So because we went and found that in one of those very first elements and we were storing it in a variable, we're now referencing it later on in our flow and throwing that into one of our fields. Date requested, so filling this in just so that we can, maybe track SLA times. We can see how long this ticket has been in existence, how long was it open, all that good stuff we can do with date fields, of course. So just using a global kind of current date time field provided by Salesforce. Description, so description is, again, a custom field on my ticket object. We're going to map over the description that we've gotten from our end user in our screen component. We're just going to map that over and throw it into our description field. Record type ID. So as we saw in, well, let me try and click back in there. As we saw, no, it's not letting me do it. That's all right. As we saw in the element right above this one, we just went and found that Lightning migration record type for our custom ticket object. So we stored that in a variable. And again, we're just using that variable, specifically the ID, and just throwing it into our record type field for our newly created ticket. Requester, so again, this value here, this is a formula. We already looked at a formula that I created in another element in this flow, so I won't get into that, but you just use formula as a resource. You'll have your formula kind of pane. You build out your formula. In this case, I'm of course using current user ID formula. Status. So status is a custom, again, I keep saying custom pick list field, of course, right? It's our custom object. So status is just a field that we've created on our object. And Salesforce is going to give us the pick list values based off of that field. So just using that value, which of course new is going to make sense. And then subject. So similar to description, probably should have put it next to description in this field pane here, but same thing, right? So we're just going to grab the subject that our end user provides us with in that screen component. Salesforce really just saves it themselves for us to use, right? I didn't save it in a variable or anything like that. It's really just kind of like a resource, and we're just going to map that over to the subject field on our ticket. So now our ticket's been created, and what are we going to do with it? Well, let's store the ticket ID in a variable, right like that, and that way, again, kind of common theme here, because we're going to have it in a variable, we can then use and reference it a little bit later on in our flow. So we'll cancel out of that, and let's go on with our next element here. So our ticket's been created, right? End user doesn't even know it yet, but they've created that ticket. So good job on them. Let's hit them with another screen, right? So as you saw in the demo, once our user selected next after really just giving us the information, well, we're going to ask them if they'll be uploading an attachment or not. So I like this part a lot because, again, having the attachment is always helpful if maybe they're having a validation rule or a system error, seeing the actual screen they're looking at. More information, the better, right? Especially from a support user perspective. So what are we doing with this screen element here? Well, I've just found from over here in my components bar, I found a radio button component, drag and dropped it, and you're gonna, of course, build it out over here on the right. So I'm building this radio buttons component out exactly how I'm building out my pick list component in the very first screen element on this flow. So I'll be quick going through this. There isn't, because it's kind of the same thing, I'm not gonna get too into detail or specific about it, but again, data type will be text. You'll set up some choices. I've done yes and no. And that's it. So I'll cancel out of that. Again, if you want more information on how I built that, or aren't sure how to do it, go to the very top here, this screen component. Same thing, right? Same two different choices, just of course different names. Let me zoom out here. The same thing goes for our decision element, right? So because I want to make sure I get through everything here, I'm not going to go through this, but it's the same exact setup as I've done for my decision element up here, right? Just again, two different outcomes. In our case, down here at the bottom, yes or no, right? And again, this is for if our end user is going to be uploading an attachment. So what happens when they select yes? Well, we're going to go left and we're going to present them with another screen, and it's going to include a file upload component. So again, just grabbing that from over here on the left-hand side of the screen. And this is really, there's a lot going on here. It seems like it, at least. For this demonstration, for this example, really not doing too much with it. So you'll give it an API name, you'll give it a label, and related record ID. So that's where we're going to be using that variable, that we created and stored our new ticket ID under when we created our ticket, right? And I think it was maybe one or two elements above this. So that's important, right? Because when our end user wants to attach, something to the ticket they're creating, we need to obviously know what record to, relate these attachments to. So as I go down here, I think that's just about all I've done for this part, or at least this component, right? So uploaded file names. So I guess this is the last thing, right? So I've created a collection variable just to store the files. And it's a collection because, what happens if our end user uploads multiple attachments? Well, a collection variable will allow us to store them together, keep them together, and then reference them and obviously attach them onto our ticket, later on in our flow. So that's all I've done for this file upload component. I'll cancel out of there. And then, of course, either way, either direction our user goes here, yes or no, we're going to hit them with that confirmation screen, right? So your ticket has been created. This is just a display text component. A little bit different for if they go with yes, right? Because we're also letting them know, with the attachment. So that's essentially the end of the flow from, our end user perspective. Last but not least, which is super important, we have an email alert going out. So as you see over here on the left-hand side of this toolbox menu, we don't actually have an email alert component or element. So you're going to want to go with your action element, and up here at the top here, we'll filter by, we'll go with type, and we'll find down at the very bottom, email alert, search it in the pane here, and then you'll see what email alerts are available for you to use in this process. So I've already done that, but if I open this up, what's really important and required, so it's not like you're going to forget, but down here at the bottom, if you are going to use an email alert, with a template at least, my email alert that I've selected, it has that template included, which has some merge fields. So, that template needs to know where to get its values from, what record is it looking for, to fill in the information on the template, right? Because I'm using those merge fields. So that's where, again, we're going to reference that variable from that new ticket that we created. So we've used this variable a couple times, right? So you're not limited to just use it one time. You can do it as many times as you want. So we'll cancel out of that. That's really it for kind of the Lightning migration side of things. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole opportunity creation flow. It's really all just pretty much the same elements here. Of course, it's missing right, the attachment kind of part of the process. I didn't necessarily want to show or build that twice, but what's important that I do want to show is that very first screen element that we're going to hit our user with when they select this ticket type. So specifically, the lookup components, right? So as we saw in the demo, we have a lot more information that we're trying to get from our end user because, you know, it's an opportunity, right? The sales ops team member who's going to be getting this ticket needs to know this information when they're creating that record. So to touch on the lookup components really quickly, because I just think they're so cool. They're really powerful, but at the same time, they're really easy for us to set up on these screen elements, but also, as we saw, for people to use. So what have I done? So for these components, well, we'll just search lookup, right? You'll find that. You'll drag it into the middle of the screen here. And then again, you'll build your component over here on the right. So you'll give it a name, field API name. This is important. So this account _C is the field API name off of the account field that I've built on my custom object. So if you're going to use a custom object, you're going to grab that field API name from that custom object. Label, pretty self-explanatory, right? And then object API name. So of course, we're going to be using our custom ticket object, just grabbing the API name from setup. So that's it. That's all you have to do to set up one of these really powerful lookup components. And these are all going to, trying to think of the right word here, but these are all going to respect sharing and permissions and visibility settings that you have in your org. So at least for us, the Northeast team isn't going to be able to see accounts out in the West Coast. So these components are going to respect any type of that sharing settings that you have set up. So we'll cancel out of there. That's it for the flow, right? That's pretty much the build. Now, I think I'm about running out of time, but let me get out of the flow. Last but not least, let's bring this full circle, right? We need to enable this flow for our end users to use when they're in, as we saw in the demo, when they're in that sales app, right? So again, from setup, we'll quick find and we'll search app. And under apps, we'll click onto app manager. And now on a per app basis, you can build out your utility bar to, of course, enable this flow. So in my case, I'll go down here to number 10, right? My Lightning sales app. It does, again, have to be in Lightning. And we'll hit edit. And over here on the left, so under app settings, we'll find utility items. And you can build out your utility bar, including adding this flow onto that utility bar. So you'll click add utility item. You can either search or just find flow right here. And then you'll set up the flow properties down here on the right. So if you scroll down here to the bottom, I'm pretty much just leaving all this blank other than the name, right? You'll probably want to change that. But as far as the flows that are going to be available for you to select or use with the utility item, from the best of my knowledge, I think that it does have to be a screen flow. And I'm going on a limb here, but I think that because I have another flow set up in this org, but as we saw, it's an auto launch flow and it's not available for me here. So, or maybe it is if I clear this out. Nope, certainly not. So it looks like, which makes sense, the only flows you're going to have available here are any that you can, maybe launch with a screen. So that is, that's it for the demo and the builds. I'm hoping I didn't go too fast. There was a lot that I wanted to cover. Tried to be as specific as I could with some of those, elements and resources that I had built. But again, hopefully it all makes sense, and hopefully you guys think it's cool and interesting, and maybe something that would be useful to you, in an org that you're either an admin or a developer for. So Jen, I guess I'll send it back over to you and see if there's any questions.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. So as a reminder, if you have any questions, go out on the Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer community to post them. They could be related to Matt's presentation or just a general process automation question. We do have one question in from Marina, and she is asking, could you talk about your decision to use a custom object for this ticketing system versus the out-of-the-box case object?
Well, I think we just kind of decided to go with a custom object, a whole new one altogether, just because, we're using case so heavily as is. And, I guess we certainly could have just maybe built some record types and page layouts off of that case object. But, being able to really just start from scratch with this custom object, we knew, I'm sure, or I'm hopeful a lot of you in the past have kind of juggled with, all the crazy permissions and where to go for what to be able to show, certain records and objects to people. It's always like kind of some crazy puzzle that we have to unwind. So, for us starting this process, having, based off of our own custom object from scratch, I think it was almost, I don't want to speak for the rest of the team, but it was certainly seemed kind of like a comfort thing, right? Because we can really just kind of limit everything to, absolutely the only things we've built off the object, and then kind of open it up as we go. Whereas for cases, our customer support team and, we have a lot of processes already set up on that object. So, with all that said, I think it'd kind of be an org by org basis, right? Kind of just personal preference based off of how your org's already set up.
Great. So we'll give another minute or so for any additional questions. So while we wait on that, how did you learn Flow?
So Flow was something where it was kind of something that myself and a couple of the other admins on the team, we actually needed to learn it, because if I can think back to a couple of years ago, we were trying to automatically delete records, and we couldn't do that with, a process builder. You can certainly do it with code, but, none of us really had the skill to do it at that point. So we saw that Flow could do that. So it was something where, hey, we need to learn this. We have to watch some videos, and we need to go to Automation Hour actually and watch some webinars on this and use that stuff. So I think deleting records was one of the needs, as well as changing record types. So I think, or I hope there's been a lot of other admins who have kind of, had to battle a process builder when trying to change a record type. You'll build out your process builder, and then you'll realize, oh no, I can't actually change the record type of a record with the process builder. So Flow came up a lot. Specifically, Jen, I think I had actually seen maybe some of your posts or something about it. Using a Flow to change a record type was possible.
All right, I am refreshing the Trailblazer community. And I am not seeing any additional questions.
Okay.
So, all right. So, and we're almost at time. So, thanks so much, Matt, for coming on and presenting. Feel free, if you want to do part 2, come back in 2020 and present that as well.
Okay. No, thank you for having me on. Again, it was a great opportunity. Happy to be able to show some solutions that certainly work for us, and I'm hopeful that they work for others.
Great. And with that, that closes out Automation Hour for 2019, and we'll talk to you next year. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.